The morning sun cast long shadows across New Geneva Station's observation deck as finished his routine maintenance check on the atmospheric processors. 3 years into his assignment as the station's chief engineer, he had grown accustomed to the breathtaking view of 442B's vast oceans, stretching endlessly beneath the floating research facility. The planet's unique properties made it an ideal location for cooperation, with its diverse aquatic ecosystems supporting life forms from dozens of different worlds. Wiped the sweat from his brow and packed his tools into their magnetic case. The processors were running at optimal efficiency, which meant he could finally take that break he'd been promising himself for the past 6 hours. As he walked toward the recreation area, the gentle hum of the station's artificial gravity generators provided a comforting background rhythm to his footsteps. New Geneva Station was humanity's first major joint venture with the Galactic Cooperation Council, a sprawling research facility that housed scientists, diplomats, and support staff from 17 different species. Had volunteered for the assignment partly out of curiosity about alien cultures, but mostly because the pay was exceptional and the work challenged him in ways his previous positions never had. The recreation deck buzzed with activity as various species mingled during their off-duty hours. Near the large viewing windows, a group of researchers discussed their latest findings in their melodious, multitonal language. Their tall, graceful forms moved with an almost dance-like quality as they gestured toward holographic displays showing microscopic marine life. At the central seating area, several diplomats engaged in what appeared to be a heated debate with their human counterparts about trade regulations. The blue-tinted skin seemed to shimmer more intensely when they became animated, and their large, multifaceted eyes reflected the ambient lighting in fascinating patterns. Had learned to appreciate these multicultural gatherings during his time on the station. Despite the occasional misunderstanding or cultural clash, the various species had developed a remarkably functional community. Children of different species played together in designated areas while their parents worked, creating a unique environment where friendships formed naturally. He grabbed a cup of coffee from the dispensary and found a quiet spot near the eastern viewing portal. The coffee was synthetic, but the programmers had done an excellent job replicating the taste of his favorite blend from Earth. As he settled into the comfortable chair, allowed himself a moment of contentment. Life on New Geneva Station had its challenges, but moments like these reminded him why he had chosen to leave Earth behind. The peaceful atmosphere was interrupted by a sudden commotion near the children's play area. Looked up to see a small crowd gathering around one of the interactive displays. At first, he assumed it was just another minor accident or disagreement between the youngsters, but the increasingly urgent tones of the adults drew his attention. Rising from his chair, walked toward the disturbance. As he approached, he could see a young Aquarian child, probably no more than 6 standard years old, standing near one of the large viewing windows. The child's pale blue skin had taken on an alarming grayish tint, and the delicate gill slits along her neck were fluttering rapidly in obvious distress. Aquarians were one of the more recent additions to the Galactic Cooperation Council, and knew relatively little about their physiology. What he did know was that they were amphibious beings who required regular exposure to water to maintain their health, particularly the younger ones whose respiratory systems had not yet fully adapted to atmospheric breathing. The child's guardian, an adult Aquarian with the typical tall, slender build of her species, was speaking rapidly to Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, the station's chief medical officer. The Aquarian's own gill slits were fluttering in agitation, and her webbed hands gestured frantically as she explained the situation. "She needs to get to the aquatic facilities immediately," Dr. Hawthorne was saying as approached. "How long has she been out of water?" The Aquarian Guardian's response came in heavily accented Standard Galactic, her voice carrying the characteristic musical quality of her species. "Nearly 4 hours. I thought she would be fine for the cultural exchange program, but she is younger than I realized. Her breathing adaptation is not complete." Watched as the child swayed slightly on her feet, her large, dark eyes beginning to lose focus. The situation was clearly becoming critical, and he could see the panic building in her guardian's expression. "The nearest aquatic facility is in Section C7, Dr. Hawthorne said, consulting her portable medical scanner. "That's at least a 15-minute journey by transport, and I'm not sure she has that long." As if to emphasize the doctor's point, The young Aquarian suddenly stumbled, her legs giving out beneath her. Her guardian caught her before she could fall, but could see that the child's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Her gill slits were now barely moving, and her skin had taken on an almost translucent quality that suggested severe dehydration. "There has to be something closer," said, stepping forward. "What about the emergency pools in the medical bay?" Dr. Hawthorne shook her head grimly. "Those are filled with sterile saline solution, not the specific mineral-rich water that aquarian physiology requires. It might help temporarily, but it could also cause additional complications." The crowd around them had grown larger, with representatives from several species offering suggestions and assistance. A scientist proposed using the hydroponic bays, while an engineer suggested converting one of the maintenance tanks. All of their ideas had merit, but they would take time to implement, and time was something they clearly didn't have. Looked at the distressed child in her guardian's arms and felt a familiar surge of determination. Throughout his career, he had built a reputation for finding creative solutions under pressure, and he wasn't about to let this situation defeat him. There had to be an answer, something they were all overlooking in their panic. As his mind raced through the station's layout and available resources, suddenly remembered something from his orientation briefing 3 years ago. During the tour of the research facilities, they had visited the xenobiology labs, where various alien specimens were studied in controlled environments. Several of those labs contained large tanks filled with water from the subjects' home worlds, maintained at precise temperature and mineral compositions. "The xenobiology labs," said suddenly, causing everyone to turn toward him. "Dr. Reeves has several tanks in Lab 7 that contain water from various aquatic worlds. One of them might be suitable for aquarian physiology." Dr. Hawthorne's eyes lit up with understanding. "The comparative ecosystem study tanks. You're right, one of those contains water from Prime, but Lab 7 is in the restricted research section. We'd need authorization from—" "No time for authorization," interrupted, already moving toward the exit. "Dr. Reeves is off duty, but I know the lab codes from my maintenance work. We can sort out the paperwork later." Without waiting for a response, broke into a run toward the transit tubes that would take him to the research section. Behind him, he could hear Dr. Hawthorne giving rapid instructions to her medical team and the Aquarian Guardian. The sound of hurried footsteps told him they were following, but he didn't slow down to check. The transit tube journey to the research section felt like an eternity, though knew it was only taking a few minutes. He used the time to mentally review everything he knew about the xenobiology labs and their security systems. Dr. Reeves had always been particular about maintaining proper environmental controls for his specimens, which meant the tanks would be in perfect condition. As the transit tube came to a halt, was already moving toward the exit. The research section was quieter than the rest of the station, with most of the scientific staff currently engaged in field work or analysis in other areas. This worked in their favor, as there would be fewer people to question their unauthorized entry into the restricted lab. The security panel outside Lab 7 glowed softly as approached. His engineering access codes should work on most of the station's systems, but he had never tested them on the research labs. Taking a deep breath, he input his authorization sequence and waited for the system's response. For a moment nothing happened, and felt his heart rate spike with anxiety. Then the panel flashed green, and the lab doors slid open with a soft hiss. He had never been so grateful for the station's standardized security protocols. Lab 7 was a marvel of engineering, with dozens of tanks and containment systems housing specimens and environmental samples from across the galaxy. The air was thick with humidity and carried the complex mixture of scents from various alien ecosystems. Soft blue lighting provided optimal viewing conditions while minimizing stress on the specimens. Quickly scanned the room, looking for the tank that Dr. Hawthorne had mentioned. Near the far wall, he spotted a large cylindrical container labeled Primary Ocean Sample. The tank was at least 2 meters in diameter and filled with crystal-clear water that seemed to sparkle with an inner light. As he approached the tank, could see that it contained several small aquatic plants and what appeared to be microscopic organisms that gave the water its distinctive luminescence. The temperature and mineral readouts on the control panel showed levels that matched what he remembered from his brief research into aquarian physiology. The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor announced the arrival of Dr. Hawthorne and the others. quickly began the process of opening the tank's access port, grateful that Dr. Reeves had designed his systems with emergency situations in mind. The tank's protective field disengaged with a soft chime, and the access platform extended automatically. "Is this going to work?" asked as Dr. Hawthorne rushed into the lab, the Aquarian guardian close behind her with the unconscious child in her arms. Dr. Hawthorne quickly consulted her medical scanner, checking the water's composition against the readings from the child. "The mineral levels are close enough," she said with obvious relief. "It's not a perfect match, but it should stabilize her condition until we can get her to a proper medical facility." The Aquarian guardian didn't wait for further discussion. With careful reverence, she lowered her child into the tank's warm water. The effect was almost instantaneous. The young Aquarian's gill slits immediately began moving more regularly, and the grayish tint of her skin started to fade back to its natural pale blue. Watched in fascination as the child's eyes fluttered open, revealing the large, dark orbs that were characteristic of her species. She looked around in confusion for a moment, then spotted her guardian and gave a weak but unmistakably happy smile. The relief in the room was palpable as everyone realized that the immediate crisis had passed. "She's going to be fine," Dr. Hawthorne announced after taking several readings with her medical equipment. "Her respiratory system is stabilizing, and her hydration levels are improving rapidly. We'll need to keep her in the water for at least an hour before attempting to move her to the medical bay." The Aquarian guardian's gratitude was evident in every line of her body as she knelt beside the tank, speaking softly to her child in their native language. The musical tones of Aquarian speech filled the lab, creating an oddly soothing atmosphere after the tension of the past few minutes. "Thank you," the guardian said too, her standard galactic carefully pronounced despite her obvious emotion. "You have saved my daughter's life. I am Coral, singer of deep currents, and this is my daughter, Small Pearl, who dances." Felt a warmth spread through his chest at the formal introduction. Among Aquarians, the sharing of true names was a significant gesture of trust and gratitude. He replied with a slight bow, following the protocol he had learned for interacting with Aquarian dignitaries. "I'm just glad we found a solution in time." As the immediate emergency subsided, found himself studying the young Aquarian more closely. Small Pearl, who dances, was clearly feeling much better, her natural curiosity beginning to reassert itself as she explored the tank's environment. She seemed particularly fascinated by the luminescent organisms in the water, reaching out with delicate fingers to touch them gently. Dr. Hawthorne continued monitoring the child's vital signs while explaining the situation to the other medical personnel who had arrived as backup. The lab had become a temporary medical facility, with various species of medical professionals offering their expertise and support. "I should probably contact Dr. Reeves," said, suddenly remembering that they were using his research tank without permission. "He's going to want to know why there's a patient in his xenobiology sample." "I'll handle that conversation," Dr. Hawthorne assured him. "What you did here was exactly right. You saw a problem, identified a creative solution, and acted without hesitation. That's exactly the kind of thinking that saves lives." As the medical team prepared to transport Small Pearl, who dances, to a more appropriate facility for extended care, reflected on the events of the past hour. He had come to New Geneva Station seeking professional challenges and adventure, but he had found something much more valuable, a sense of purpose and community that transcended species boundaries. The young Aquarian would recover fully, and her guardian's gratitude would be something treasured for years to come. But perhaps more importantly, the incident had demonstrated something fundamental about life on the station. Despite their differences in physiology, culture, and background, the various species could work together effectively when faced with a crisis. As he helped clean up the lab and prepared to file his incident report, realized that this was just the beginning of something larger. The bonds forged in moments of crisis often proved to be the strongest, and he had a feeling that his relationship with Coral, singer of deep currents, and her daughter would continue to develop in unexpected ways. The afternoon shift was beginning as finally made his way back to his quarters, exhausted but satisfied with the day's work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but for now, he was content knowing that he had made a difference in the life of a child who might otherwise have been lost. Outside his window, the vast oceans of 442b sparkled in the afternoon sun, their depths holding countless mysteries yet to be discovered. Smiled as he settled into his chair, already looking forward to whatever adventures the next day might bring. Life on New Geneva Station was never boring, and moments like these reminded him why he had chosen to leave the familiar comforts of Earth behind. The rescue of Small Pearl Who Dances would become a story told throughout the station, a testament to human ingenuity and the power of quick thinking under pressure. But for it was simply another day at work, another problem solved through determination and creativity. He had no way of knowing that this single act of heroism would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his own life, but the future of human-alien relations throughout the galaxy. 2 weeks had passed since the incident in the xenobiology lab, and had almost convinced himself that life on New Geneva Station had returned to normal. Almost. The subtle changes in how other species regarded him were impossible to ignore completely. Conversations would pause when he entered a room, not out of suspicion or fear, but with something that looked remarkably like respect. The researchers who had once barely acknowledged his presence now greeted him by name when they passed in the corridors. The diplomats included him in their informal discussions about station policy, seeking his input on technical matters that had never been his concern before. Even the normally reserved crystalline entities from the sector had begun to pulse with softer colors when he approached, which their cultural liaison had explained was a sign of approval and friendship. Tried to tell himself that he was imagining things, that people weren't really treating him differently. But when he received a formal invitation to address the monthly Interspecies Cooperation Assembly, he could no longer deny that his actions had attracted attention far beyond what he had intended. The invitation had arrived on his personal communicator during his morning maintenance rounds, bearing the official seal of the Galactic Cooperation Council. The message was brief, but significant. Chief Engineer, your presence is requested at the monthly assembly to discuss recent developments in emergency response protocols. Your innovative solution to the Aquarian medical emergency has generated considerable interest among council members. Stared at the message for several long minutes, unsure whether he should feel honored or concerned. The Interspecies Cooperation Assembly was the station's governing body, composed of senior representatives from each member species. Their meetings typically dealt with high-level policy decisions, resource allocation, and diplomatic issues. Engineers like himself rarely had reason to attend, let alone address the assembly directly. He was still contemplating the implications when his communicator chimed again with an incoming personal message. The sender identification showed the flowing script of Aquarian text that he had learned to recognize as Coral Singer of Deep Current's signature. Friend, the message began, using the Aquarian formal address for honored individuals. I hope this communication finds you in good health and spirits. Small Pearl Who Dances continues to recover fully from her recent illness, and her vitality grows stronger each day. We are forever in your debt for the swift action that preserved her life. Smiled as he read the message. Regular updates on Small Pearl's condition had become a bright spot in his daily routine, and hearing that she was doing well never failed to lift his spirits. The young Aquarian had proven to be remarkably resilient, and according to her mother, she had already begun asking when she could return to the children's program activities. The message continued. I write to inform you that word of your heroic actions has reached the Aquarian Council of Elders on our. The preservation of a child's life, particularly through creative problem-solving and personal risk, is considered one of the highest forms of honor in our culture. The Council has voted unanimously to bestow upon you the title of Deep Current Friend, a distinction rarely granted to those outside our species. Nearly dropped his communicator in surprise. He had studied enough about Aquarian culture during his time on the station to understand the significance of such a title. Deep Current Friends were considered part of the extended family structure that formed the foundation of Aquarian society. The honor came with both privileges and responsibilities that extended far beyond simple recognition. The formal ceremony will take place during the next high tide celebration, the message concluded, which coincides with your station's monthly assembly. I hope that you will accept this honor, as it would bring great joy to Small Pearl Who Dances and our entire family pod. Leaned against the wall of the maintenance corridor, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn his life had taken. 2 weeks ago, he had been a competent but relatively anonymous engineer, focused on keeping the station's systems running smoothly. Now he was being invited to address the governing council and formally inducted into an alien family structure that he barely understood. The sound of approaching footsteps drew him from his reverie. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne rounded the corner, her medical bag slung over her shoulder, and her usually composed expression replaced by one of barely contained excitement. "There you are," she said, slightly out of breath from hurrying through the corridors. "I've been looking all over for you. Have you seen the reports from the outer colonies?" "What reports?" asked, tucking his communicator away and focusing on the doctor's animated expression. Dr. Hawthorne activated her portable holographic display, showing what appeared to be a compilation of news feeds from various galactic networks. "Your rescue of that Aquarian child has become galactic news. Look at this." The holographic display showed a news anchor from the Terra Prime Broadcasting Network, humanity's primary interplanetary news service. The anchor was a professionally groomed woman with the kind of serious expression reserved for important stories. "In a remarkable display of human ingenuity and compassion," the anchor was saying, "Chief Engineer of New Geneva Station successfully saved the life of a young Aquarian child who was suffering from severe respiratory distress. Using his knowledge of the station's research facilities, improvised a life-saving treatment that has impressed alien observers throughout the galaxy." The display switched to footage of New Geneva Station, followed by what appeared to be interview segments with various alien dignitaries. Watched in amazement as Ambassador spoke eloquently about human problem-solving abilities, while a council member praised the quick thinking that had prevented a tragic loss of young life. "It gets better," Dr. Hawthorne said, adjusting the display to show additional news feeds. "The Crystalline Collective issued a formal statement calling your actions a luminous example of interspecies cooperation. The Vegan Trading Union has proposed new emergency protocols based on your improvised solution. Even the normally secretive enclave sent a message of commendation through diplomatic channels." Stared at the scrolling text and images, struggling to process the magnitude of what he was seeing. What had seemed like a simple emergency response had somehow become a galactic symbol of human capability and character. "I don't understand," he said finally. "All I did was remember where the research tanks were located. Any engineer on the station could have done the same thing." Dr. Hawthorne shook her head, her expression growing more serious. "That's where you're wrong. I've reviewed the incident reports from similar emergencies on other stations and colonies. In most cases, the response would have been to contact the nearest medical facility and hope for the best. The creative thinking you demonstrated, the willingness to take personal risk and break protocol to save a life, that's specifically human behavior." She gestured toward the holographic display, which was now showing a panel discussion featuring and cultural experts from multiple species. "The other species are fascinated because they're realizing something about humans that they hadn't fully appreciated before. We don't just follow procedures and protocols. We adapt, improvise, and find new solutions when the old ones aren't sufficient." Watched as a distinguished-looking scientist explained to the panel how most species would have approached the emergency. "The typical response pattern among our member species involves systematic consultation with appropriate authorities and adherence to established protocols," the scientist was saying. "The human approach of immediate creative problem-solving, while potentially risky, demonstrated an effectiveness that has prompted significant discussion among our research communities." The implications of what Dr. Hawthorne was telling him began to sink in. His actions hadn't just saved small pearl who dances. They had apparently revealed something significant about human nature to the galactic community. The responsibility of that revelation felt overwhelming. "Dr. Hawthorne," said slowly, "what exactly are people expecting from me now?" Before she could answer, his communicator chimed again with another message. This one bore the official seal of Earth's Colonial Administration, the government body responsible for human activities beyond the home system. The message was marked with high-priority indicators and carried authorizations that recognized as coming from the very highest levels of human government. "Chief Engineer," the message began, "congratulations on your exemplary service and the positive attention your actions have brought to human capabilities throughout the galaxy. Your innovative response to the emergency situation has been noted by senior officials and has contributed significantly to humanity's reputation among our galactic neighbors." Felt his stomach tighten as he continued reading. Messages from the colonial administration typically meant that someone important had taken notice of your activities, and that was rarely a comfortable position to be in. In recognition of your service and the unique position you now occupy as a symbol of human ingenuity, you are hereby requested and required to serve as a special liaison between human interests and alien communities throughout the sector. This appointment comes with full diplomatic credentials and the authority to represent human policy in interspecies negotiations. The message continued with details about salary increases, diplomatic immunity, and a host of responsibilities that had never wanted or trained for. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, was a note indicating that refusal of the appointment was possible but would require formal hearings and extensive justification to colonial administration officials. "This is insane," muttered, showing the message to Dr. Hawthorne. "I'm an engineer, not a diplomat. I fix machines, not political problems." Dr. Hawthorne read through the message quickly, her expression growing more concerned with each paragraph. "They're serious about this. Look at the authorization codes. This directive comes from the Secretary of Colonial Affairs personally." Slumped against the wall, feeling the weight of expectations and responsibilities settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. In the span of 2 weeks, he had gone from anonymous engineer to galactic celebrity to unwilling diplomatic representative. The trajectory of his life had changed so dramatically that he barely recognized it as his own. "There's something else," Dr. Hawthorne said gently, clearly recognizing his distress. "The station commander wants to see you in her office immediately. Apparently, we're receiving delegations from multiple species who want to meet with you personally." The walk to Commander Sarah's office felt like a funeral march. Had always respected the station's commanding officer, a former military pilot who had transitioned to diplomatic service with remarkable success. Commander had built New Geneva Station into one of the most successful multi-species facilities in known space through a combination of firm leadership and cultural sensitivity. Her office reflected that success, with artifacts and gifts from dozens of different species arranged tastefully around the room. The walls displayed commendations and treaties, evidence of the many successful negotiations and agreements that had been hammered out within these walls. Commander looked up from her desk as entered, her expression mixing sympathy with professional determination. She was a compact woman in her late 40s, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of steady gaze that came from years of making difficult decisions under pressure. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to one of the comfortable chairs arranged in front of her desk. "I assume you've received some interesting messages today." "That's one way to put it," replied, settling into the chair and trying to organize his thoughts. "Commander, I need you to understand that I never intended for any of this to happen. I just saw a child in trouble and tried to help." Commander smiled, but there was a note of sadness in her expression. "I know that, and that's exactly why this situation has become so significant. You acted from pure instinct and compassion without considering the political or diplomatic implications. That kind of authentic response is exactly what the galactic community has been hoping to see from humanity." She activated her desk display, showing what appeared to be a schedule packed with appointments and meetings. "In the past 24 hours, I've received formal requests for meetings from 17 different species delegations. They all want to meet the human who demonstrated such remarkable problem-solving abilities. Several of them have hinted that they're reconsidering their positions on various human colonial proposals based on what they've observed about our species' capabilities." Stared at the packed schedule, feeling increasingly trapped by the consequences of his actions. "Commander, I'm not qualified for this kind of attention. I don't know anything about diplomacy or interspecies relations. I'll end up making things worse." "You might," Commander agreed, surprising him with her honesty. "But you might also accomplish things that trained diplomats could never achieve. The galaxy is watching us now, and they're specifically watching you. How you handle this situation could affect humanity's position in galactic politics for generations to come." She leaned back in her chair, studying his expression carefully. "I'm not going to lie to you. The pressure is going to be enormous, and the stakes are higher than anything you've ever faced. But I've watched you work for 3 years, and I've seen how you handle complex problems under stress. The same instincts that saved that Aquarian child might just help you navigate this diplomatic minefield." A soft chime from the commander's communicator interrupted their conversation. She glanced at the display and sighed. That's the first delegation, a group of trade negotiators who want to discuss new commercial agreements with human colonies. They specifically requested to meet with you as part of their evaluation process. Felt his mouth go dry. Commander, I don't know anything about trade negotiations. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth, Commander replied, standing up and straightening her uniform. Tell them about human values, about why you acted to save that child, about what drives humans to take risks for the sake of others. They're not really interested in trade statistics or economic projections. They want to understand what makes humans tick, and you're probably the best person on the station to show them that. As they prepared to leave the office, Commander placed a hand on shoulder. I want you to remember something. You saved a child's life 2 weeks ago, and that was the right thing to do regardless of the consequences. Whatever happens next, don't let the political complexities make you regret that action. The conference room where the delegation was waiting had been arranged according to their cultural preferences, with soft lighting and carefully positioned seating that allowed for their species' complex social hierarchies. The three rose as and Commander entered, their graceful movements flowing like a choreographed dance. The lead negotiator was a tall, elegant individual whose bronze-colored skin seemed to shimmer in the room's gentle lighting. Their large, expressive eyes focused on with obvious interest, and when they spoke, their voice carried the characteristic musical quality of their species. Chief Engineer, the negotiator said, using the formal greeting gesture of their species. I am Harmony of Evening Stars, Chief Trade Negotiator for the Commercial Collective. We are honored to meet the human who demonstrated such remarkable wisdom in preserving young life. Managed a respectful bow in return, drawing on the cultural training he had received during his orientation. The honor is mine, Harmony of Evening Stars. I hope that my actions have not caused any disruption to your important work. This expression brightened and could see approval in their large eyes. On the contrary, your actions have provided valuable insight into human nature that will greatly inform our future negotiations. We are particularly interested in understanding the decision-making process that led to your innovative solution. What followed was an hour-long discussion that covered everything from emergency response protocols to human philosophical approaches to problem-solving. Found himself explaining concepts that he had never consciously considered, describing the thought processes and values that had driven his actions in the xenobiology lab. They listened with obvious fascination as he described the importance of individual initiative in human culture, the willingness to take personal risks for the benefit of others, and the tendency to seek creative solutions when traditional approaches proved insufficient. They asked detailed questions about human education systems, family structures, and social values, clearly trying to build a comprehensive understanding of the species they would be negotiating with in the future. By the time the meeting concluded, was exhausted but oddly exhilarated. The genuine interest in understanding human nature had transformed what he had expected to be an awkward diplomatic encounter into something more like an extended philosophical discussion. Their final comments suggested that the meeting had exceeded their expectations and would lead to more favorable consideration of human proposals in future negotiations. As the departed, Commander turned to with an expression of surprise and approval. That was expertly handled. You managed to convey exactly the kind of information they were looking for without revealing anything that could compromise human negotiating positions. I just told them the truth, replied, still somewhat amazed that the encounter had gone so smoothly. They seemed genuinely interested in understanding why humans act the way we do. They were, Commander confirmed. And that's exactly what makes you so valuable in this role. You represent authentic human values and decision-making processes in a way that trained diplomats often struggle to achieve. The other species trust you because you're not trying to manipulate or deceive them. You're just being yourself. As they returned to Commander's office to prepare for the next delegation, began to understand that his life had changed in ways that went far beyond simple recognition or career advancement. He had become a symbol of human nature itself, a living example of the qualities that distinguished humanity from the other species in the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but as he thought about small pearl who dances playing safely in the children's area and the improvements in interspecies relations that his actions had apparently triggered, realized that he was beginning to accept his new role. The galaxy was watching, and he would do his best to show them what humanity could offer to their shared future among the stars. The legacy. 6 months had passed since life changed forever in the xenobiology lab of New Geneva Station. The view from his new office in the diplomatic sector still amazed him each morning, but the wonder had been tempered by the weight of responsibilities he had never imagined bearing. The title on his door read, Special Envoy for Human-Alien Relations, but still thought of himself as an engineer who had stumbled into the most complex repair job of his career. The morning's schedule, displayed on his personal holographic interface, showed the usual mixture of diplomatic meetings, cultural exchanges, and crisis management sessions that had become his daily routine. At the top of the list was a priority message from Admiral Harrison Blake, the senior human military officer responsible for colonial defense throughout the sector. The Admiral's communications were always significant, but the urgent classification and personal encryption suggested something far beyond routine military matters. Activated the secure communication link and found himself looking at Admiral Blake's weathered face, framed by the sterile environment of a military command center. The Admiral was a career officer whose reputation for strategic thinking had earned him respect throughout human space, and his expression carried the kind of gravity reserved for the most serious situations. Envoy, Admiral Blake began, using his formal title despite their previous informal interactions. I'm contacting you because we have a developing situation that requires your unique expertise. 3 days ago, our monitoring stations detected an unknown vessel entering the outer edges of the system. The ship doesn't match any known configuration in our databases, and its energy signatures suggest technology significantly more advanced than anything we've encountered before. Felt his pulse quicken as he absorbed the implications of the Admiral's words. First contact situations were among the most delicate and potentially dangerous scenarios in interstellar relations, and the system's strategic importance made any unknown presence a matter of serious concern. The vessel has been maintaining a position approximately 2 light hours from New Geneva Station, Admiral Blake continued, making no aggressive moves but also not responding to any of our communication attempts. I believe the ship's design elements suggest a species we've never encountered before, possibly from outside our local galactic region. The Admiral's image was replaced by tactical displays showing the mysterious vessel's position and sensor readings. Studied the data with the analytical skills that had served him well as an engineer, noting the unusual energy patterns and the ship's apparent ability to remain perfectly stationary relative to the system's gravitational field. Envoy, Admiral Blake's voice continued as the displays cycled through various technical analyses. Every diplomatic protocol we've attempted has failed to establish communication. The alien vessel simply ignores our signals, whether transmitted through standard galactic channels or the specialized frequencies used by known species. We're running out of options, and the military command is beginning to consider more aggressive alternatives. Understood the unspoken implications. If diplomatic contact failed, military commanders would eventually recommend treating the unknown vessel as a potential threat, which could lead to the kind of interstellar incident that had triggered wars throughout galactic history. "What do you need from me, Admiral?" asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "We need you to try something different," Admiral Blake replied, his image returning to the communication link. "Your unconventional approach to problem-solving has impressed representatives from dozens of species over the past few months. If anyone can find a creative way to establish communication with an unknown alien presence, it's the human who improvised a life-saving medical treatment using a research aquarium." The reference to his rescue of small pearl houdances brought a slight smile to his face, but the gravity of the current situation quickly reasserted itself. First contact with a completely unknown species was infinitely more complex than saving a drowning child, with potential consequences that could affect the entire galaxy. "I'll need access to all the sensor data and analysis reports," said, already beginning to formulate approaches to the problem. "And I want to consult with the cultural specialists from the other species represented on the station. Different perspectives might reveal patterns that human analysis has missed." "Granted," Admiral Blake replied immediately. "I'm transmitting full authorization codes that will give you access to all military and scientific data related to this situation. Time is becoming a critical factor, Envoy. Our intelligence suggests that other galactic powers have detected the unknown vessel as well, and if they decide to take independent action, the situation could deteriorate rapidly. As the communication link closed, found himself staring out the window at the vast expanse of space, where an unknown alien vessel waited silently for someone to find the key to communication. The challenge was unlike anything he had faced before, but the same instincts that had driven him to save an Aquarian child were already beginning to work on the problem. His first step was to review all available data about the mysterious vessel. The technical reports painted a picture of a ship unlike anything in known databases, with energy signatures that suggested power systems based on principles that current galactic science barely understood. The vessel's materials appeared to be some form of crystalline composite that shifted in response to energy fluctuations, creating patterns that might be decorative or might serve some unknown functional purpose. Most intriguingly, the ship's position wasn't simply stationary. Careful analysis revealed that it was maintaining a complex orbital pattern that kept it at precisely the same relative distance from New Geneva Station, while accounting for the system's gravitational dynamics. The mathematical precision required for such positioning suggested either incredibly advanced navigation systems or an intuitive understanding of celestial mechanics that went far beyond current galactic knowledge. Spent the morning immersed in technical analyses and theoretical models, but by afternoon he had reached the same conclusion as the military specialists. Conventional approaches were failing because they were based on assumptions about alien behavior that might not apply to this unknown species. His next step was to consult with the diverse group of cultural experts and stationed on New Geneva. The afternoon conference room session brought together representatives from 8 different species, each offering insights based on their own experiences with first contact situations and interspecies communication. Harmony of Evening Stars, the trade negotiator who had become a regular collaborator in diplomatic efforts, offered the first perspective. Among our species, positioning behavior often reflects social hierarchies and cultural values, they explained in their characteristic musical tones. The vessel's precise orbital maintenance might be a form of respectful distance, suggesting beings who prefer to observe before engaging. Dr. the station's senior human nodded thoughtfully. The energy signatures don't match any known biological patterns, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're dealing with mechanical artificial intelligence. There are theoretical biological systems that could produce similar readings. The most fascinating insight came from resonance of crystal depths, a crystalline entity whose species communicated through complex electromagnetic field modulations. Their translated thoughts appeared on the conference room's display systems as shimmering text that seemed to pulse with inner light. The vessel's crystalline components suggest beings who might perceive reality through electromagnetic spectrum analysis, rather than the visual light interpretation used by most organic species, resonance of crystal depths communicated. Traditional communication methods might be invisible to them if they perceive information through different sensory modalities. This observation sparked something in his mind, a connection between seemingly unrelated pieces of information that his engineering background had trained him to recognize. The vessel's crystalline composition, its precise orbital mechanics, and its apparent indifference to conventional communication attempts might all be symptoms of a fundamental difference in how these aliens perceived and interacted with their environment. "What if they're not ignoring our communications?" said suddenly, causing everyone in the room to focus on him. "What if they're simply receiving information through completely different channels than the ones we're using to transmit?" He activated the room's holographic display system and began pulling up technical data about the mysterious vessel's energy patterns. "Look at these readings. The ship's crystalline hull isn't just reflecting or absorbing energy. It's modulating the electromagnetic spectrum in complex patterns that our sensors are recording as background noise." Doctor leaned forward, her expression brightening with understanding. "You're suggesting that what we're interpreting as mechanical system fluctuations might actually be attempts at communication." "Exactly," replied, his excitement growing as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. "We've been trying to contact them using audio transmissions, visual signals, and standard galactic communication frequencies. But if their sensory systems are based on electromagnetic field analysis, our signals might be like trying to communicate with a deaf person by whispering." Harmony of Evening Stars made a complex gesture that had learned indicated intense interest in body language. This would explain the precise orbital positioning as well. If they communicate through electromagnetic field manipulation, maintaining exact spatial relationships would be crucial for clear signal transmission. The implications of this theory were staggering. If was correct, the alien vessel had been trying to communicate from the moment it arrived in the system, but the signals were being transmitted through methods that galactic science had never considered as communication channels. "We need to reanalyze all the electromagnetic data," said, already moving toward the door. "Not as background noise or system fluctuations, but as potential communication attempts. If there are patterns in the modulations, we might be able to decipher their meaning." The next 18 hours passed in a blur of intense analysis and theoretical modeling. Worked alongside teams of specialists from multiple species, each contributing insights based on their unique perspectives and expertise. The station's most advanced computers were tasked with finding patterns in what had previously been dismissed as electromagnetic static. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning, when a mathematician named Silverwind-Through-Void identified recurring mathematical sequences hidden within the electromagnetic fluctuations. The patterns were incredibly complex, suggesting a form of communication that conveyed multiple layers of meaning simultaneously. "It's like a language based on mathematical harmonics," Silverwind-Through-Void explained, their blue-tinted skin shimmering with excitement. "Each frequency modulation corresponds to numerical relationships, but the combinations create meaning structures that go beyond simple mathematics." Studied the decoded patterns, his tired mind struggling to comprehend the implications of what they had discovered. The alien communications weren't just attempts to make contact. They were detailed descriptions of the vessel's origins, its crew's intentions, and their reasons for visiting the system. According to the decoded messages, the unknown aliens called themselves the Architects of Harmony, and they came from a region of space far beyond the known galactic boundaries. They had traveled for centuries to reach this system, drawn by electromagnetic signatures that suggested the presence of diverse intelligent species working together in peaceful cooperation. Most remarkably, the Architects of Harmony had been studying New Geneva Station's communications traffic for weeks before their arrival, learning about the various species represented on the station and their individual cultural characteristics. They had been particularly interested in reports about its rescue of small pearl houdances, seeing it as evidence of the kind of interspecies cooperation they hoped to find. "They're not here as invaders or conquerors," realized as he read through the decoded communications. "They're refugees, looking for a place where their species can contribute to a larger galactic community. Their home region was destroyed by some kind of cosmic catastrophe, and they've been searching for civilizations that demonstrate the values of cooperation and mutual assistance." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when the communication analysis revealed that the Architects of Harmony had been waiting for a response that demonstrated understanding of their electromagnetic communication methods. They weren't ignoring galactic contact attempts. They were testing whether the local species possessed the creativity and analytical skills necessary to decode their messages. "It's another problem-solving test," said with sudden clarity. "Just like the situation with small pearl houdances, but on a much larger scale. They wanted to see if we could adapt our thinking and find new ways to establish communication." The response message that and his team crafted was a masterpiece of interspecies cooperation. Using the electromagnetic modulation techniques they had learned from the Architects of Harmony, they transmitted a complex mathematical harmony that incorporated elements from each of the species represented on New Geneva Station. The delegation contributed musical mathematical sequences that conveyed emotional content alongside informational data. The mathematicians added probability calculations that expressed uncertainty and hope simultaneously. The crystalline entities provided electromagnetic signatures that represented concepts of beauty and artistic appreciation. Even small pearl houdances contributed, with her mother translating her simple desire to make new friends into the mathematical harmonics that the architects could understand. The response from the alien vessel was immediate and overwhelming. The electromagnetic patterns that flooded the system's communication channels carried joy, relief, and gratitude in mathematical forms that transcended language barriers. For the first time in their long journey, the Architects of Harmony had found the kind of diverse, cooperative civilization they had been seeking. The formal first contact ceremony took place a week later, with the architect's vessel taking up a position near New Geneva Station that allowed for direct communication through their preferred electromagnetic channels. The aliens themselves remained aboard their ship, but their translated communications revealed beings of incredible wisdom and scientific knowledge who had spent perfecting the art of interspecies cooperation. Found himself at the center of the negotiations, serving as the primary human representative in discussions that would determine the future relationship between the Architects of Harmony and the existing galactic community. The aliens were particularly interested in his role in recent diplomatic developments, seeing his unconventional problem-solving approach as representative of humanity's potential contributions to galactic civilization. The agreements that emerged from these negotiations exceeded everyone's expectations. The Architects of Harmony offered to share advanced technologies and scientific knowledge in exchange for the right to establish permanent colonies in systems controlled by cooperative species. Their expertise in electromagnetic engineering could revolutionize everything from communications to space travel, while their philosophical insights promised to deepen understanding between diverse species throughout the galaxy. More importantly, the successful first contact demonstrated that the values had displayed during his rescue of Small Pearl Who Dances were exactly what the galaxy needed for continued peaceful development. His willingness to take risks for others, to think creatively under pressure, and to work cooperatively with diverse species had not only saved one child's life, but had opened the door to relationships that would benefit countless worlds for generations to come. As stood in the observation deck 6 months later, watching as architect vessels joined the regular traffic around New Geneva Station, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this point. The shy Aquarian child he had saved was now a regular visitor to his office, bringing drawings of the new alien friends she had met and asking countless questions about the mathematical music the architects used for communication. Coral, singer of Deep Currents, had become one of his closest friends and advisors, her insights into family structures and social dynamics proving invaluable in negotiations with species that prioritized communal relationships over individual achievements. The Deep Current Friend title she had bestowed upon him had opened doors throughout Aquarian space, leading to trade agreements and mutual defense pacts that strengthened humanity's position throughout the sector. Commander had been promoted to Admiral and placed in charge of the new Interspecies Cooperation Initiative, a galactic organization dedicated to facilitating peaceful contact between unknown civilizations. Her first action had been to establish the protocols, a set of guidelines for creative problem-solving in diplomatic crises based on the lessons learned from his various adventures. The changes in So's life were perhaps the most remarkable of all. From a maintenance engineer focused on keeping machines running, he had become a symbol of human potential and a bridge between diverse species throughout known space. His office received communications from across the galaxy, with beings seeking advice on everything from technical problems to complex social issues. Yet at its core, his approach remained the same as it had been during that desperate afternoon in the xenobiology lab. When faced with a problem, he looked for creative solutions. When confronted with suffering, he acted to help. When presented with the unknown, he approached it with curiosity rather than fear. The latest message on his desk was from the Galactic Cooperation Council, informing him that his methods had been so successful that they were being implemented as standard protocols throughout civilized space. The doctrine emphasized creative problem-solving, interspecies cooperation, and the willingness to take calculated risks for the benefit of others. As he prepared for another day of meetings with alien dignitaries and cultural exchanges, smiled at the irony of his situation. He had come to New Geneva Station seeking adventure and professional challenges, but he had found something much more valuable, a purpose that transcended species boundaries and a role in shaping the future of galactic civilization. The rescue of one drowning alien child had become the foundation for relationships that would endure for, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of courage and compassion could have consequences that echoed throughout the stars. The engineer who had simply wanted to help a child in distress had become living proof that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its technology or military might, but in its willingness to risk everything for the sake of others. In the depths of space, alien ships continued to arrive at New Geneva Station, drawn by reports of the human who had demonstrated the values that made peaceful coexistence possible. Each new encounter brought fresh challenges and opportunities, but faced them with the same fundamental approach that had guided him from the beginning. See the problem, find a solution, and never hesitate to do what was right. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, but as long as there were beings willing to reach across the void with compassion and creativity, the future would be bright with possibilities that no single species could achieve alone. Had learned that lesson in a research lab while saving a child's life, and he would spend the rest of his career sharing that knowledge with civilizations throughout the stars.